Today I'm going to show you how to make this paper bead table skirt. I'm using this for some upcoming craft shows this spring and summer, but I think the basic construction of the stringing, there's just lots of things that you could do with this. You know, this is just, you need to know how to do this just in case you need to do it, because you never know, right? I think so. So in a previous video, which I will link to, I showed you how to make the beads, how to roll them, how to dye them, and get these pretty variegated colors like I got. So we've got that down. And today I'm going to show you the stringing technique, and I'll show you how I attach them to the table as well. So here we go. Now to make strings like this, okay, I mean, you're stringing beads. Realistically, how hard is it, right? Yeah, you can do it if you know of a different way, an easier way, a way you prefer, that's fine. I'm just showing you what I did, what works for me, and what I felt would securely hold the beads without a bunch of really visible knots. You know what I'm saying? So, okay, to do the beads like I did, string them like I did, you're going to need some beads. Mine are 1.5 inches long. The length, width, size of yours doesn't matter. I'll say more about that. You're going to need some string. I'm using a heavy-duty sewing thread, polyester sewing thread. This is T135. It's a UV-resistant polyester, kind of a silvery white thread. You can use fishing line, you can use other thread, you know, whatever you want. You need something sturdy. I was real happy with my decision to use this afterwards when I had everything done and there is minimal tangling. When I string them on fishing line, I get really bad tangling. For whatever reason, these don't tangle bad at all. I don't know. Anyway, you'll need that. You'll need a needle, you'll need some scissors, and maybe or maybe not a ladder. I'll explain more about that later. So the first thing that you want to do is measure from the top. If you're doing a table skirt, measure from the top of your table to the floor. See how many inches that is. Then I laid my beads out to see how many beads it would take to make that number of inches. And I ended up with 20. That's going to vary depending on the length of your bead. And you could use these to make door beads, you know, just you have to measure the height of your door opening. Do you remember door beads? We all had them in the 70s, remember? Okay, well if you do remember, you're probably about my age then, so, you know, woohoo, far out. Anyway, there's lots of stuff you could do with strings like this, and I'm just going to show you how I strung them in case it is helpful for you. So, 20 beads is what I need for my length of string. So here's 20 beads, and I really need to make another string because I want to have a few extras on hand in case something happens when I'm transporting my skirt and you know I need to replace a strand or whatever. So this is good. I'm going to start by cutting a length of string. I didn't even measure. I just want to make sure it's longer, probably a good foot longer than my bead string. Okay. And I've got kind of a big needle here. You don't need one this big, but you don't need a teeny sewing needle. You just need to make sure that your needle and your thread will go through your beads, and that's going to depend on the size of the opening that you left when you made them. So now I'm going to thread one bead through, okay? And this is what I did. I went through the bead one time, just like this, and then I'm going to come back up through the bead like this. So see, the string is on the bead right there. And then I'm going to do that again. Just like that. So I've got 2 strings on the bead. I've wrapped it around. And then I'm just going to grab one of those go through, and you really don't need a needle for this if your holes are big enough. Okay, let's stitch the needle. Go through like that, just go around, pull everything tight, and make a knot. You want to be extra secure, do it again. So lift up the string and go underneath it. Oh, come on. Go underneath it, wrap this around, come up through, make a knot. Just like that. And because I didn't want a bunch of, excess string hanging off, this is where the ladder comes in, and it really only works if you have like a polyester thread. If you're using a cotton thread and you try to light the ends, it's going to just kind of act like a wick and catch fire. This one, if you heat too much, it will just melt away and the whole thing falls apart. So you want a kind of a happy medium. I'm just going to cut this off, and I left like a little teeny tail right there. Okay? And then I'm going to take my ladder and just heat that tail to kind of melt it. Just a little bit. And that way the tail disappears, and then the heat sort of kind of heats the thread together and holds it secure. So this is not going to come off. Now you string the rest of your beads with or without the needle. It doesn't matter. I like with the needle just because. And I just string them on, kind of mixing the colors to make sure I don't have a bunch of the same color jammed up together. Now, once I've got all 20 beads strung on there, I'm going to do the exact same thing on this end that I did here. I just want to make sure that my beads are all snugly together. You don't want a little gap. Okay, so make sure that they're snug, and then you're going to do the same thing on this end bead. You're going to go around it, up through the bottom, out through the top. When you do it just once, you can kind of slide the bead up and down. So slide it down to make sure that your string is snug. Then do it again, just like we did with the first bead. So now you've got 2 strings wrapping around it. And then just like we did with the first bead, go around, whoops, go under the string and around. So you make a loop and then come up through it and make a knot, keeping everything snug. Okay, let's do that again. Let's do that better. Under the string so that you make a loop like that. Make sure your loop's not twisted. Make a loop like that, and then up through the loop to make a knot and pull tight. And there is your string. Now what I did here, I left this tail, and quite a long one. That's why I made sure that my string was, at least a foot longer than my length of my beads, because I need this to sew it onto the table. So let me switch the camera and I'll show you how I did that. Now I used this 1.5 inch wide nylon webbing to attach my bead strings to. I used it mainly because it's what I had. I had a lot of it. And I needed, okay, this goes around the front and the 2 ends of a 6-foot table. And I got a ruler out and I marked with a white pen 1-inch marks on my webbing to show where to attach my strings. And I actually drew the lines like this because I really didn't know at this point how I was going to attach them. I was totally making this up as I went along. So anyway, yeah, I just used a white paint pen, marked 1 inch on my strap, and discovered that I needed 129 strings to go around 3 sides of my table. That's 129 strings of 20 beads each. Do the math. I made over 2,500 beads. And it really didn't take as long as I thought it would, because I just worked on it, you know, a couple of hours in the evenings and on the weekends. I wasn't making beads all day every day. And it took, I don't know, maybe a month of just off and on. And they really kind of added up quicker than I thought they would. So it wasn't that big of a deal, and I kind of enjoyed it. If I went in from the beginning and thought, I'm going to make this table skirt and I need 2,500 beads, I probably would have said, oh, screw that. I'm not doing it. But I'd made a ton of beads before I realized what I was going to do with them. So then it wasn't so bad. So, okay. I've got my little tail here. I'm going to thread my needle. And I thought at first, okay, I should have used black thread. I didn't have black thread this heavy. You know, I used this kind of silvery white color. But in the end, it ended up being okay. Because what I did, I came up through the front. This is the front without the lines. And just made sure I was on my white line in the back. I came in maybe 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch is all from the edge. Okay. Did like that. And then I did my regular knotting technique. You know, here we go. Come up under the bead string, just like that. Pull this snug. And then loop it around and make the knot. Just like that. I knotted it on there just like that. I mean, basically, just, you know, easy, elementary attaching, nothing fancy. Okay, when I got done, I did the same thing I did on the other end. Snipped this off, left a teeny tiny little piece of thread, and then heated it very quickly and carefully to melt it down, so that it doesn't show and so that the threads kind of melted together. Don't heat it too long or it will melt. It will also melt this webbing. This is nylon webbing, and when I cut it, I can, you know, heat the ends to kind of melt it to keep it from fraying. So yeah, it is possible to melt the webbing as well. So just very, very slight heat on there. So this is the back side. This is how the beads are hanging off of my table. I attached Velcro here, Velcro on the table, and that's how the construction goes. Let me give you a better view of that. Okay, can you see right here? It's just like in the sample one I did. Sewed it to the edge of the webbing. I pull this off. See, there's my lines. I sewed the Velcro along the top edge, just like that. Sewed the Velcro just under this is the top of the table right here. This is the side. Sewed the other piece there, and then they're sticking great. They've been hanging for about a week, and they're doing really well. Some of them, I'm getting a little gap. Uh-oh. Sorry, that means it's time for me to make Jason's lunch. He comes home for lunch. I get a little gap right here from where I'm thinking the beads have kind of settled into each other. Doesn't bother me. I think if I had made sure that I was tying them tighter, it wouldn't be so much of a gap. But as you can see, it's just barely a little gap. I did use heavy duty Velcro, and I did use sticky back Velcro because I thought that it would stick. You know, it said will stick to fabric. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, yeah, it does. But what it doesn't stick well to is this nylon. I did just the sticky, stuck it onto the cloth and then onto the webbing. And within 20 minutes, I was in the living room and I just heard the sound of beads falling to the floor. And the Velcro on the webbing was letting loose. So I just ran it through my sewing machine. I don't necessarily recommend that you run sticky back Velcro through your sewing machine. I have a heavy duty industrial machine and it did just fine. It didn't come up at all. But I would imagine you could probably run a good sewing machine that way. So be aware that if you're going to make something with a lot of beads like this, even though they're lightweight, it adds up. And you're probably going to need to sew your Velcro if you want to make sure that it's really going to stay good. So there you have it. I hope that you can use this little tip for some of your own paper bead stringing and make something cool, some groovy door beads or something. I don't know. That's it. The end.